All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Nick Housley, and I'm the Director of Clinical Research at Motus Nova. And welcome to your tutorial to how to actually address some issues about putting the hand mentor on if you find that you have some significant tone in your arm. So today I'm going to help kind of walk you through some of the standard tricks of the trade that we can use to help make that process easier if you do find yourself in that position. So we do have a standard tutorial that kind of walks you through a generalized approach, but today we'll be walking through a couple of the modifications to that standard donning approach. So for those of you who find that you have some significant tone in your fingers, and also in your elbow and your shoulder as well, we'll be walking through and modifying the way that we would have to do a standard application of the hand mentor. And so we'll start by actually maintaining our hand mentor here, or grabbing our hand mentor, and we'll do a couple of preparatory activities. The first of these will be actually to prep the various components. And so we have a couple of Velcro straps that we'll be addressing. On our forearm pad, we have two straps that we'll be undoing. We also have two straps on our hand interface that we'll be undoing as well. Okay, so I'm going to be mimicking an impairment on my right side, so a left-sided stroke or right-sided impairment, and I'll be having some difficulty extending my elbow and also having difficulty with my wrist and fingers as well. So to kind of help give you guys an idea how we might modify the procedure. Okay, so we'll start by actually reducing, or I guess preparing some of the actual pads here. So we will always take the pads off on one side. And so if you have a right-sided impairment, we'll take the pads on that are off that are closest to you. So if it was a left-sided impairment, we would take off these pads closest to you here, okay? So just modify that if you do find you have a left-sided impairment. With respect to a right-sided impairment, we'll take off these pads closest to me here, and that will leave them attached to the one side. Okay, then we will actually prepare by modifying and sort of removing these Velcro pads on our hand interface. This will allow our foam pad to kind of act as a clamshell. You may see that kind of acting just like this, where it kind of clamshells in. And that will reveal this silicone pad here, which has our fingers, that will basically allow us to have a couple of finger indentations to help us separate them and keep them straight, okay? Then the final step of 3 is going to be actually allowing this space right here to be as large as possible. This gives us a nice big target to get through in the first movement as we prepare to don the hand mentor. We can do this by loosening these two black screws on either side of the hand mentor. This actually allows us to move our hand interface up and down in those tracks. You can see that it becomes further away and closer. This is how we'll modify the hand mentor later, but to make it a bit easier for us to put it on, we'll start by making it as long as possible, so as further away in the track as we can. And what you can do is once you've done that, go ahead and tighten it back up to make sure it's a bit snug so it doesn't move around on us. And now we're ready to don the hand mentor. So if you find that you have some significant tone in your elbow or in your hand, we can actually modify the position a little bit. So we classically will show you to put the hand mentor on in a pronated position with our palm down. But if you find that very difficult to get to, we can kind of go with a neutral posture with our thumbs in the air. So kind of neutral would be up like this. A supinated posture would be down like this, like we have kind of a bowl of soup here. So we can have our hand up like this, and we can actually rotate the hand mentor to accommodate us instead of us modifying to meet the hand mentor, okay? Since it is mobile, it's pretty easy to move around. We'll just actually rotate it on its side. So we'll have the hand mentor kind of facing out like this, and that will leave it up on its edge. And this will allow us to easily put our hand through that hole that we just made. And this is our first step. So take your left side and make sure that the hand mentor kind of slides through just like that. Don't worry about its orientation right now. We'll address that in just a second, okay? The next thing we're going to do is we actually want to attach the hand mentor to our forearm. That's our next step. And when we do this, and this is kind of one of the reasons why we only undid one of those black Velcro straps, is all we have to do now is pull it tight around our forearm, just like that. And of course, we can adjust this in a moment, but this will just allow us to be rigidly attached to start with. So we'll attach both of those straps, and then what we'll do is we'll see if we can actually move around a little bit. If we do have some motion, then we can go ahead and pronate our hand a little bit. But if you don't have that and you still have it find it very difficult to keep your hand and your wrist, I guess rather keeping them in this bent position, we can go ahead and leave it just like this and don it with a vertical posture, okay? The next thing we're going to do is actually focus on our hand. So if we do find that we have a lot of tone in our fingers and our thumb, what we can do is we can spend a few moments to manually extend them and get them on our foam pad here, okay? Just for note, our thumb should go underneath the foam pad, okay? So you should find your thumb comes underneath, and you can spend a few moments here just extending your fingers in their respective pad placements. So there's these little pillars that will help divide where our fingers need to go, okay? And so you can use, in my case, my left hand here to help keep them flat against the pad. And then as we do this, you can note that this foam pad will come up and actually kind of clamshell in and support the tops of our fingers. And so just like we did with the start of our forearm pads, we'll just briefly attach the Velcro here and we'll kind of do a quick status update, okay? So here we have all the Velcro pads attached, but we don't have everything perfectly lined up, and that's what we can address now. I want to draw your attention to where the foam pad is here with respect to my fingers, okay? You can see that there's a fair amount of my fingers that are actually visible here. We want to avoid this because if we are working very hard, we may find that our fingers are going to pull out from the hand mentor. So we want to make sure that this is fully encompassing our hand here, okay? When we do this is we actually move this whole foam pad piece closer to the hand mentor. When we do this is we take these two black screws, we loosen them a little bit. And this actually allows the hand mentor to move back and forth on those tracks, okay? So if we were to rotate it back, we could see if we were going like this versus much closer, okay? So once we actually move this a little bit closer, we can then go ahead and tighten them up. And then the modification here is we can then come back over and move the hand pad a bit closer to us, okay? And you can see now that we have much more of our fingers that are covered by the pad. And this means that we stand a less likely to actually pull out from the hand pad. Okay, now we want to check is our alignment. That's our final step here, okay? So what I want you to imagine is take your two fingers kind of in a pincer grasp here, and I want you to actually just feel where your wrist joint is, okay? So if you can't actually fully rotate your hand, that's totally fine. Use your, in my case, my left hand, to feel where that bony joint is in your wrist. And we want that to be lined up with this joint of the hand mentor, okay? So imagine drawing a line straight through that joint and through our hand mentor joint. And if we find that we're in good alignment, that means we're good to go. If we need to modify that slightly, we would just, and say our wrist joint is further away from our hand mentor joint, we would just loosen these guys up again and slide it back just a touch more, just like that, okay? And you can modify that dependent on how long your arm is and how long your hand is. So once we have that alignment properly accommodated, we want to make sure that these two black screws are fairly snug, okay? Now, the final thing we want to do is check the sort of orientation of the hand mentor and see if these forearm pads are sufficiently tight, okay? So if you find that you can get maybe more than one finger inside of the foam pad right here, we would want to actually come in and tighten them up. They should be fairly snug, right? If we can't, if we have too much motion there, the hand mentor won't be able to detect your movement. And so we do need to have these fairly snug. And so the kind of rule of thumb here is you should be able to have maybe one finger in between the hand mentor itself and your forearm. It's a good rule there. The other thing that you can do is if you find it difficult to know whether or not your fingers are fully covered here, you can take kind of a finger test here. You can take one finger and slide it on the inside of your palm. And I'm going to quickly show you what that looks like here. You can see if I were to slide my finger across my palm here, I would not feel any indentations. Now, just accentuate this really quickly, if we found that our pad was too far forward and I slid my finger across this, you would feel those ridges of my fingers. And so that's a good trick you can use if you can't see it or you can't move your arm visually up to see this. You can just do that kind of a quick check with your finger of your less impaired limb to kind of slide across, and you should only really feel the palms of your hand there. Okay, very good. So I'll just go ahead and readjust this. And all the while, I was not actually fully extending my elbow here, okay? So that's the really important thing. And it's totally fine to do the donning process like this. And in fact, if you find it difficult to actually use the hand mentor in the traditional posture that's fully pronated, it's totally appropriate to use it in this thumb up position, where you can go up into extension and down into flexion. You just need to make sure you remember that our up and down is now going to be sort of translating in this sort of in this dimension here. Now, I'll bring in our foam pad. This actually ships with every hand mentor, and you can use this to help adjust your positioning as well. So one thing that's really common with a falling stroke survivor or falling a stroke is we have some laxity in our shoulders. And so if you find that the hand mentor is pulling down too much, we can use this foam pad to help accommodate and support our shoulder position. And the way to do this is if we're using it on its side, I'd recommend having the foam pad be sticking off the end this way. That would allow us to then move up and down with some free degree of movements over here. The same would go true if you were using the hand mentor on your left side. You'd have it off that edge. If you don't have the foam pad, you can use a pillow that's rolled up maybe, or a towel that's rolled up as well. That will allow us to get that movement. Once you have the hand mentor on, you can try to go into that pronated position. If you're not fully able to accommodate that, some amount of rotation is totally fine. So I think those kind of really encompass some of the main steps for the donning process. Now, one thing I do want to mention is, this is maybe a good tip as you go on to your therapy, is between each of the games, what you can do is you can take that opportunity to check the status of your hand mentor, right? Take that one finger check and actually roll your finger across the hand mentor and see if your fingers are starting to pop out. If they are, you can just go in and readjust things to make sure that it's fully fit for you. And you also, because you're gonna be working very hard, you may find that things move around a little bit. Totally expected. Go in and between games, check the tension on the foam pads for your forearm and also for the actual hand interface. And if they need adjusting, take that moment to not only rest and recuperate, but also to adjust the hand mentor. Okay, all right, I think that does incorporate all of the sort of tips and tricks. Until next time, thanks so much, guys.